grand pour te donner, mais ce que nous avons, nous te donnons. Cameroun, au nom de Jésus-Christ de Nazareth, lève-toi et prie, prie. Alléluia, Alléluia, Alléluia.
Everybody. The time is 2 p.m.
Orange is adding millions on top of millions. Latest car, brand new. And trips to Morocco for your enjoyment. Buy hash 111 star 1 hash or hash 150 hash and also via Max 8. Orange is here.
The 2 p.m. newscast
with
Mapala Zita.
Friday, the 28th of November 2025. Good afternoon, Yaoundé. Good afternoon, Cameroon. Good afternoon, Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to today's Royal English Magazine, our Friday regular on 88.4 Royal FM and live on YouTube at Royal FM Cameroon. The headlines. Cameroon has renationalized her electricity sector by buying 95% of shares of the energy supply company NAO. That, ladies and gentlemen, will be focused on today's magazine. Our magazine will also feature our news of the day, which comprises latest national and international news updates. And of course, our weekend sports file comes up towards the end of this magazine when Biwa Brian joined me. Ladies and gentlemen, those were the headlines. Good afternoon. You're welcome to today's Royal English Magazine. My name is Mapala Zita. We begin with the first part of this magazine, which is, of course, our news of the day. And it is a presentation of our head of reporters brigade, Fringwe Crispin. Good afternoon, Crispin.
Good afternoon, Mapala Zita. The Ministry of Territorial Administration is requesting more than 42.6 billion francs CFA from the state budget to strengthen the rule of law and to protect human rights. According to Minister Paula Tanganji, the funds will be used to enhance the safety of lives and property, intensifying the fight against insecurity, crime, and terrorism, as well as strengthen territorial control. All other ministries also defended their draft budgets for the 2026 fiscal year, stating their intended projects. This was in a meeting at the National Assembly that lasted till early this morning. Here now is Minister Paula Tanganji.
We have the same priorities for 2026 because it's almost the same exercise. We have traditional commitments and we have traditional engagements. For instance, we have the civil defense. We have to think about the floods, national, catastrophic, anything which is like we can put it under the unforeseen. Then we have to ameliorate the functioning of administrative authority. We have to buy new vehicles and we have to rehabilitate some of those offices which have been for too long. So I think that basically we are saying the same thing every year, and we will just have to speed up a bit because we have gone through difficult elections. We have some infrastructure which have been damaged, and we have to rehabilitate all the buildings which were destroyed after the election.
Cameroon has been observing the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence since November 25, joining other nations in the global campaign. The international campaign aims to raise awareness and prevent violence against women and girls. The event is also an opportunity to spotlight violence against men, which is often overlooked. In the report that follows, our reporter Glory Ngange, together with a sociologist, look at some reasons why violence against men is not given much attention.
While the plight of women and girls are justly being highlighted, violence against men remains a disturbing phenomenon that has long been neglected. Sociologist Tata Peter begins by detailing the definition of violence, which goes beyond physical confrontation.
Violence is not only taking a stick or a weapon and hitting somebody with. Men undergo psychological torture, moral torture from women. Some of the women actually take it as a duty to always shout, put pressure on men, and that is violence. Unnecessary verbal exchanges that may harm or cause somebody to be psychologically depressed.
According to the sociologist, men have been made to wallow in this sad reality due to the societal norms that promote traditional masculinity.
First of all, men exercise a lot of stoicism. They actually internalize violence, and it is culturally inculcated in men not to report or come out and share their experiences. Men culturally are brought up to contain pain and to conceal it.
Dr. Tata Peter goes further to highlight some forms of violence men are being subjected to, especially in their marital homes.
Denying somebody food is violence. Denying somebody some of our social responsibilities as a woman. You deny to share a bed with your husband for reasons that are not justified is violence. Querying unnecessarily is violence.
According to statistics revealed by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 victims of intimate partner violence are men. To bring the phenomenon to the limelight, it is important to overcome the traditional notion of manliness, creating platforms where men can freely share their experiences.
On to this future story, hypocrisy in family is gradually taking the lead among siblings, and the underlying causes are consistent in interpersonal relationships. Our newsroom interviewed some Yaoundé city dwellers on what could account for the rise in hypocrisy and hatred within families, and especially between siblings. Get them speak in this Vox Pop.
In families nowadays, we prefer to preserve an apparent peace, keeping apparent good relationship with a brother, a sister, a parent, rather than being frank about what we think about their behaviors towards us, or even in the midst of the family. And also, there is a lot of entitlement going on in family.
I think one of the key reasons we see more hypocrisy and tension within families today is due to the lack of honest emotional communication. Many families talk, but they don't really express what they truly feel. Problems are kept inside, frustration build up, and there's a misunderstanding grow. Some families have taught their children to be strong, to hide their weakness, but this does not really help them. Instead, it delays them.
Through Christ, because if you don't love Christ, if you don't know Christ, you cannot also recognize your brother or your sister or anybody around you like your own person. So you have to give your life to Christ, receive Christ as your Savior, read the Bible, understand the commandment inside, then you learn how to live with your brothers and your sisters without hate stress.
Ngwenye Victorine is a sociologist who reveals some of the reasons for hypocrisy in families and what could be done to remedy such phenomenon.
Hypocrisy in our society today has greatly been influenced by those discrepancies in level of riches in society. Some people are poor, some are rich, and then jealousy, our level of education. So it has fostered a lot of hypocrisy in society today. And then the rise in technological development too. You have people talking on the phone and they will be lying in broad daylight. You call somebody, you are seeing the person and the person is telling you, I'm in Bamenda, I am in the southwest region, I'm not in town, just because might be he is owing you or he does not want to see you. For one one reason or the other. Others is because might be they are owing you money and they don't want to pay the money. Some people might have started studying together, but in one reason or the other, somebody goes ahead of the other one, and the difference in social levels now begins to affect their way of life. There is that jealousy, especially from the person who is down there. He is always looking at the person whom he thinks is up there, that the person is richer than him. But I used to say there is no difference, because somebody might be richer than you with money, but you are richer than that person in health or in attitude. Some people still come from those families that we call them golden families. Some children are born into golden families, and when they start making friends, might be just for friendship reason, which is very natural. They have friends who are poorer than them. But somewhere along the line, you see, especially the parents, they will start putting in some ideas. And why are you moving with this person who is richer than you? Why are you doing this? And you see, jealousy will step in, and hypocrisy comes. So there is a lot in society. There are just those social differences that makes hypocrisy a tool in society today.
And in economic news, the Bank of Central African States, BEAC, has reduced its liquidity supply to commercial banks in Cameroon from 800 billion to 700 billion CFA francs, 100 billion francs CAD, which marks a significant shift in managing excess liquidity in the regional banking market. Just what could be the impact of such move on commercial banks in Cameroon and on the country's economy at large? Jeffrey Tachom asked some economists and collected their views in this report.
Jamo Haiwa, research analyst at the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute, forecast rainy days for commercial banks after the reduction of their liquidity supply by the regional monetary institution.
Commercial banks in Cameroon will face tighter interbank conditions, higher short-term funding costs, more competition for reserve, which will likely push up lending rates. As a result, credit to households, SMEs, and the informal sector may become more expensive, slowing investment and consumption in the short term.
However, the economist explains that BEAC's decision could be a necessary evil aimed at restoring monetary policy transmission.
A leaner liquidity environment can help ensure inflation expectations, strengthen financial discipline, and reduce distortion from excess liquidity. So, over time, this may improve credit allocation efficiency, support financial stability, and foster more sustainable growth.
The reduction in liquidity could lead to tighter monetary conditions, thereby slowing down consumption and investments. In a nutshell, this move aims to manage excess liquidity and promote more efficient use of resources in the regional interbanking market. However, its success depends on various factors, including the bank's ability to adapt and the economic environment.
Out of the country, West Africa's bloc ECOWAS suspended Guinea-Bissau's membership hours after an army general was sworn in as the country's president. The decision was reached at a virtual session of ECOWAS Mediation and Security Council chaired by Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio last night. The meeting included leaders from Cabo Verde, Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, Senegal, and Benin, among others. At least 128 people have died in a devastating fire that engulfed multiple high-rise buildings in Hong Kong, China. A further 79 people have been injured in the city's deadliest blaze in more than 70 years, which occurred in the northerly suburb of Tai Po, while dozens remain missing. The tower blocks had been undergoing renovation when the fire began. The cause of the blaze remains unknown. The U.S. President Donald Trump has said he will permanently pause migration to the U.S. from all third world countries. The U.S. President wrote in a Truth Social post that this would allow the U.S. system to fully recover from policies that had eroded the gains and living conditions of many Americans. Back to you, Mapalazita.
Thank you very much, Frimwe Crispin. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have this piece of music.
My country people, yes. talk. Yeah, them just the parambulate. So story heavy, yeah, oh. Never no bring light, oh. Never no bring light, oh. Generator whatever, yeah. Generator whatever, yeah, oh. Plenty greedy man for there, oh, yeah. Take a project, oh. Forget it, now do it, man, oh. Forget about the big things, oh. Say make we talk about the small things, oh. Yeah, oh, baby, forget about the big things, so say make we talk about the small things, so yeah. Yeah, oh, baby, rara, oh, yeah. Agbada, jangbaja, ulabada, rara, oh, yeah. Agbada, jangbaja, ulabada, whoever they bless me, amen. Say you go bless you too, amen. Bless your papa, oh, amen. Bless your mama, oh. Whoever they bless me, amen. Say you go bless you too, amen. Bless your papa, oh, amen. Bless your mama, oh, yeah. See me, I see you, yeah. Batura for me, yeah. Look, oh, baba. Our money, take it to other nation. Invest for your country, oh, make it a better place. Spend the money for your country, oh, make it a better place. Forget about the big things, oh, so make we talk about the small things, oh. Oh, baby, forget about the big things, oh, so make we talk about the small things, oh, yeah. Rara, oh, yeah. Agbada, jangbaja, ulabada, rara, oh, yeah. Agbada, jangbaja, ulabada, I go obodo ibo, I go to hurry to come back. And when I come back, I go to hurry to go back. I no get to charge you. My phone don't die. Don't fall for generator. Everyday situation. My country people, them go talk, parambulation, story every day.
Select football on the beat.
Big Smosa.
The Cameroon government has renationalized the electricity sector by regaining 95% of the shares of Actis Eneo. Many Cameroonians have welcomed the move, but there are fears of the stakes and challenges that await this renationalization move. Let's welcome Abel Bella Samari, Director of Information and Editorialist here at Royal FM. Good afternoon, Abel.
Good afternoon to you, Mapalazita.
Abel, as the Director of Information and Editorialist, in the following editorial, you look at what must be done for this renationalization to be successful.
Cameroon has taken a bold and historic step by reacquiring 95% of Eneo the country's main electricity company, ending over 2 decades of majority private ownership. This move is more than a simple change in shareholders. It represents a reclamation of national control over a vital resource that power homes, businesses, and the aspiration of millions of Cameroonians. For years, electricity access has been uneven, unreliable, and expensive. Rural communities remain largely in the dark. Urban areas suffer frequent blackouts, and mounting debts threaten the stability of the grid. Under private management, profit often overshadows public service. By taking back control, the state now has the opportunity to restore reliability, expand access, and align energy policy with national priorities. Renationalization promises several key gains. It allowed the government to stabilize a heavy indebted system, restructure unused debts, improve revenue collection, and enforce financial discipline. It opens the door to equitable expansion of electricity access, particularly for rural and underserved areas, moving towards universal coverage. Public ownership can also enhance transparency and accountability, giving citizens clear insight into how this essential service is managed. Moreover, the move lays the foundation for long-term investment in infrastructure, renewable energy, and modern technologies such as the smart machinery, all of which are crucial for a reliable and sustainable electricity supply. Yet, the path ahead is far from easy. Enyo faces structural weaknesses, including debts, aging infrastructure, operational inefficiency, and the challenge of balancing affordability with financial sustainability. Corruption remains a critical threat. Mismanagement, deviation of funds, and bribery have historically drained resources, delayed maintenance, and weakened public trust in the sector. Without strong oversight, the promise of renationalization risks being undermined by the same practices that have plagued the company for decades. Tackling corruption will be essential to ensure that funds allocated for infrastructure, expansion, and modernization actually reach their intended purpose. Success also depends on professional management, strong governance, and insulation from political interference. Investment must be prioritized, and tariff must remain fair but sufficient to maintain the financial health. The government will also need to secure consistent funding while ensuring that reforms are implemented effectively and transparently. Citizens must be empowered to hold leaders accountable, and independent audit and monitoring mechanism must be strengthened to prevent misuse of resources. To achieve these goals, Cameroon must restructure a new debt transparently and adopt professional and accountable management practices, invest in modernizing infrastructure and renewable energy, and integrate the utility into a broad national energy strategy. Pricing must remain fair yet sustainable, and anti-corruption measures must be enforced rigorously at every level. Engaging citizens in oversight and feedback will further strengthen trust and transparency. Reclaiming Enyo represents a historic opportunity to set the nation's electricity sector on a path of stability, fairness, and long-term development. For every household flicking a light switch and every business relying on consistent power, this is a chance to finally close the gap that have long hindered progress. Success will not happen automatically, but with vision, courage, disciplined execution, and an uncompromising fight against corruption, Cameroon can illuminate not only homes and streets, but also its future, brighter, fairer, and powered by its own hands.
Here now is our reporter Ngang Nadesh with highlights on the stages of events that led to the rebuying of NAO by the government of Cameroon.
Cameroon has undergone significant transformations in its electricity sector since 2000. In 2001, the state-owned Cameroonian electricity company Sonel was sold to the US-based firm AES Corporation, with AES holding 56% of the capital and the Cameroonian government retaining 44%. This privatization was part of the World Bank's third structural adjustment credit project. However, AES Sonel's performance was marred by frequent power outages and a failure to meet its obligation to add at least 50,000 new connections per year. In 2011, a new law was introduced to regulate the electricity sector, aiming to promote competition, particularly in production, and diversify energy sources. The law also renationalized the transmission subsector. In 2014, the Cameroonian government signed an agreement with the British investment company Actis, giving Actis a 56% stake in AES Sonel, which was renamed Energy of Cameroon, NAO. However, NAO's service quality remained poor with frequent load shedding and power cuts. Fast forward to 2025, the Cameroonian government has acquired 95% of NAO's shares, renationalizing the electricity company. The government aims to restore stability, modernize infrastructure, and improve service quality. The move is expected to boost the country's energy security and support industrialization. Some notable projects driving Cameroon's energy sector include the Nashtiga hydroelectric dam, which increased national capacity by 30%, and the Gaida solar power plant, the country's first large-scale solar installation. As Cameroon takes full control of its electricity sector with the renationalization of NAO, the government has a unique opportunity to address the country's long-standing energy challenges. The success of these efforts will depend on effective implementation, transparency, and accountability.
The Cameroon government recently signed an agreement to buy back the stake held by British private equity fund Actis in NAO, the country's main electricity distributor. Now, earlier this year, the state also increased its ownership of the cotton company Sodecoton to 89% by buying 30% previously held by Francis Giocoton. With the recent shift from privatization, Cameroonians have been sharing their expectations from state management. Get them speak in this Vox Pop compiled for us by our reporter Glory Ngange.
Government's efforts to regain NAO is a laudable one. We do hope that this giant move by the government of Cameroon will help to solve the various problems faced by the company. For the past years, lots of neighborhoods, regions have been suffering with lack of electricity, bad generators that haven't been replaced, fallen poles that are given less or no attention, constant power failure.
I think that we are just about to backpedal and go back to our days of no electricity, because from previous experiences, state parastatals don't do so well when it comes to efficiency. For example, the speed at which it would take you to do something at an office like MTN or Orange is not the same speed you take to do something at Camtel. So that tells you that there's a problem when it comes to efficiency with state parastatals.
With the government taking back control of NAO, I expect two things, that is better management and better service. I want more of stable electricity, fewer unexplained power cuts, and quicker response when fault occur. I also expect more transparency in billing that actually improve the network.
Eneo has been doing a good job because I remember before the privatization in 2014, we used to have a lot of electricity cuts, but after the privatization, there has been a lot of improvement, and I don't really know why they want to nationalize Eneo again.
And after regaining ownership of Eneo, the Cameroon government has announced that a transition roadmap is being deployed, including the involvement of public entities in paying electricity bills. This to stabilize finances, strengthen governance, and improve service delivery. The announcement was made public on Friday, November 21st, during a joint press conference by the Ministries of Communication and Water and Energy. Following this announcement, Cameroonians have been sharing their opinions on the feasibility of the development and propositions on how to carry out the initiative. Take a listen to some of them in this Vox Pop compiled by Glory Ngange.
This is a good initiative. I think that it will avoid abuse where some people use public institutions for their selfish interests. However, the minister also has to take precautions to ensure that it's not a forum by which other unorthodox people are going to use their means to misuse state money.
It's important to know that one of the highest people that is owing Eneo is the government. That is government ministries, government enterprises. They constitute one of the highest people that are owing Eneo a lot of money. So when the Minister of Water and Energy Resources says that henceforth government enterprises and ministries and all the rest institutions are going to be paying their electricity bills, I don't know what he actually means by that. Maybe they should first start by settling the money that they owe Eneo. In Cameroon, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of administrative bottlenecks. I don't know how that is going to be effective.
It's necessary and timely. For many years now, unpaid bills from state institutions, inadequate maintenance, and frequent power shortages, requiring public institutions to pay their consumption to promote accountability and reduce wastage, and also support a more reliable electricity supply. Though the main problem now is how are they going to collect the bills from these public sectors. It will only be possible if the government establish strict mechanisms such as automatic deduction from the institution system.
Reactions continue to pour in over the state's acquisition of 95% of shares from Actis Eneo. Now, these reactions keep pouring out from some entities in the country, and one of such is the Consumer Rights Association. Evans Williams Njobati approached some of these activists and recorded their diverse views for the news magazine. Take a listen.
The country has taken a significant step towards regaining control of its electricity sector by acquiring a majority of shares from the national power utility British firm Actis Eneo for a heavy sum of 78 billion francs CFA, a situation that has been received with mixed feelings by the president of the Consumers Foundation, Alphonse Aïssi Abena.
Here again we are, faced with a lion's share contract where the Cameroonian state is bowing down to unscrupulous capitalists brought in by complicit compatriots. This entire financial scheme promised massive foreign direct investments amounting to hundreds of billions, which AES, initially an American company, was supposed to use in building infrastructures and transportation lines.
Marking a majority shift in the country's energy policy and ending years of private supremacy ownership has pushed our expert to interrogate himself on several aspects.
In an allusion, the state of Cameroon sold a vehicle in practically new conditions for nearly 20 billion CFA francs and then bought it back with a smoky engine, shock absorbers that are not functioning, tires practically flat. All this for more than 78 billion francs CFA.
with aims of addressing the sector's deep financial imbalance reflected in delayed payments to producers and persistent operational challenges. The government is planning on refinancing Eneo's debt, strengthen cash flow, and improve payment regularities across the supply chain through the enforcement of more strict payment rules among all consumers, including public entities, makes the consumer rights leader to affirm it is a necessary risk. Alphonse Aïssi Abena once again.
Le passif d'Eneo est lourd.
Eneo's past is a heavy burden. Over 800 billion CFA francs in debts, with more than 2,300 employees without salaries for 4 months now. Many contractors and businesses have gone bankrupt. Even we, the consumer rights leaders, haven't received the quality of energy we needed, nor the quantity of energy promised by Eneo. Eneo has failed to fulfill its performance contracts.
With the move equally expected to improve energy security, accelerate reforms, and attract investment in this sector, it should, however, important to note that this renationalization is a part of a broader strategy to regain public control over essential services, modernize aging infrastructures, and guarantee better service quality in Cameroon.
This afternoon is an economist and executive director of the Cameroon Policy Institute, Henry Kwam. Earlier today, I made a stopover at the Institute's Yaoundé office where we had an exchange on today's magazine topic. Take a listen.
Henry Kwam, good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Now, I'm very sure you heard about government buying back the major shares in the country's electricity company, Eneo to be more precise. How did you receive this news?
Well, we at the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute, we advocate for free market ideas. We believe that when the private sector owns companies, they tend to be much more productive. And we're not saying this out of the blue. This is because if you look at the government's history in terms of ownership of publicly owned companies, the majority of them, over 90%, are loss-making. From Camwater to the airport, Cameco to Sonara, whose debt is 3.5% of our GDP. The government doesn't have a very good record in terms of managing organizations and institutions, especially vital ones. So it's unfortunate that the shares which were previously owned by Actis, a British company in Eneo, were sold. But unfortunately, this doesn't guarantee quality. Because in Cameroon, just over 70% of people have access to electricity. That's what's commonly said. But we have several Cameroonians, well over 20%, who are not even connected to the grid. And Eneo isn't innovating fast enough, because if the government today nationalized and in 1 year Eneo was implementing decentralized solar solutions or decentralized wind solutions to power villages in rural communities, then nationalization will make sense. So it's not a blanket objection against nationalization. In countries like Hong Kong and South Korea, nationalization worked to some extent, but that's because they had good governance, strong institutional policies and backing, and they also had public sector capacity. In Cameroon, evidence shows that we are ailing when it comes to institutional capacity and the ability to manage these organizations properly.
Okay. One of the restructuring terms is that every Cameroonian will now have to pay electricity bill. How feasible is this plan according to you as an economist?
Well, the government always finds ways to collect more money when it needs to, right? So I'm sure they're going to set very, very high targets for the director of Eneo, and he is going to find a way to collect the bills. Now, the question isn't so much about whether bills are collected or not, because they will be collected, because they're going to engage in regular checks. They're going to try to visit all localities, even though in practice, it's unlikely to meet the 100% threshold. Now, if the government is planning to collect all of this all of these bills, all of these payments, the government should equally ensure that there are quantitative targets when it comes to electricity access. We need to reduce the irregular supply of electricity, because the statistics which says over 70% of Cameroonians have access to electricity, that electricity is not constant. You have businesses who buy fish, and for a day or two in Boya, they don't have electricity. It's not normal. You have localities, again, in the southwest who don't have regular electricity. They can go for weeks on end without electricity. That's not normal. And the government is nationalizing at a time when they desperately need private sector involvement to accelerate innovation, to improve the quality of service, and to ultimately improve the quality of Cameroonians' lives.
Okay, Henry, we also know that before this buying over, the government has unpaid bills with NAO worth several millions of francs CFA. What becomes of this money?
Well, of course, the government is going to try to pay its bills, right? But NAO's debt itself reaches about 800 billion, isn't it? So into 2023, both their technical and commercial losses were significantly high, right? And the government is going to pay the bills, but slowly. But unfortunately, nationalization does not create an additional incentive for the government to repay its debt quickly. Because NAO is owned by the government, you might have ministries taking more time to repay their debt because they know that they cannot be sued. If it were a company owned by a private sector actor, Cameroonian investors and some international investors, the government would have had more pressure to pay its bills. So again, this comes down to public finance management. Yes, some progress has been made in terms of public finance management, but you hear the Minister Paul Motazé saying that Cameroon would prioritize its external debt, because if Cameroon doesn't pay its external debt, then it's going to be subject to ratings downgrades. It shows that the government doesn't have sufficient capacity to manage its payments effectively, because it means that they're prioritizing external debt and international investors because they want to keep going to the Eurobond markets to refinance the debt and not their domestic stakeholders.
Okay. Now let's come back to this nationalization of companies. We have several of them, like Camwater, that the government bought over, but after all the promises that were made, we still hear lots of complaints about the quality of water, its availability in areas, and we are wondering, is NAO's case going to be different?
Honestly, I think not, but I would love to be proved wrong. I would love for NAO to improve electricity access for 90% of Cameroonians, use decentralized solar solutions, invest in grid management, accelerate the adoption of artificial intelligence to manage low electricity loads and to manage its network effectively. I would love to be proved wrong. I don't honestly believe that NAO has the capacity to serve Cameroonians and provide the quality service that they require. These regular electricity outages is something that has got to stop. We plan to be an emerging country in 2035. We can't keep having electricity outages. It's not normal. And so the government has to set very strict standards and criteria to ensure that these parastatals operate properly. It's not only Camwater and NAO, it's also Sodecoton, right? When the government gets back 100% of its shares, the 100% ownership, the question we should ask ourselves is how much textile is actually produced by Sodecoton? The t-shirt, the shirts and the trousers we wear, right up to the jeans we wear, all of them are imported. So if Sodecoton has not been able to deliver for 43 years, why do we think the government owning 100% of it is going to deliver now? The government is trying to implement state-driven capitalism, which has worked in China, Hong Kong, which worked to some extent in shaping countries like Vietnam and South Korea. But those countries implemented state-driven capitalism when they had good governance, when they worked hard to eradicate corruption, and when they had the institutional and state capacity to manage organizations in a way that allows them to achieve very, very stringent targets and objectives. That's why South Korea was able to develop heavy manufacturing. The government merely retaking ownership of these institutions isn't the answer. The government, we need clear objectives so that we can hold the managers and the directors of these organizations to account. If the government says we want to increase electricity access by 5% every single year, then we know that next year at least 80% of Cameroonians should have access to electricity. If it's not met by December, then we would write to the director and ask for him to explain why we're not meeting those targets. So the issue isn't so much nationalization. For us, the issue is nationalization in Cameroon in a context where you have poor governance, weak public finance management, and a regulatory inertia and the inability of the government to adapt to the times. We prefer that there should at least be some private sector actors. The government shouldn't own 100% of everything, right? The government can own 80% and private sector investors own 20%. They should make it such that Cameroonians themselves can invest in these companies. We've seen that in the BVMAC, the splitting shares. They should make sure that Cameroon, they can sell a share at 50,000 and Cameroonians themselves invest in it so that when we don't have electricity, they can go and they can demand for changes and improve the quality of the service. So the private sector is the answer to Cameroon's problems, not the public sector.
Okay, that's great. I think you're practically entering my last question. What will be your recommendation?
So, as an economist, but also as the executive director of the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute, we have 5 recommendations that we think the government should implement now to ensure that its ownership of institutions don't become a liability for the country. First, the government must set stringent, quantifiable performance targets so that we can judge these companies at the end of every single year. Secondly, the government must also improve the human capital in these institutions to ensure that the staff who are serving Cameroonians and civil society are actually trained to do so, to ensure that our engineers know how to integrate solar panels into the grid system. Thirdly, we need to address transparency, accountability, and governance. If the directors of big institutions are investigated by CONSUPE, Supreme State Audit, and they're found to be in fault, but these directors can go to the President of the Republic and there's no retribution, or they don't repay what is asked of them, then it means that we have a system that doesn't work. Fourth, CONSUPE should be given more rights to prosecute. CONSUPE can conduct the audits, but they should also ensure that the payments are gotten where they find corrupt practices in any institution. We don't have to wait for CONAC to do that because CONAC has been releasing reports for the last 5-6 years, but how much of that money has actually been recovered? Very few. CONSUPE that audits these institutions should have the power to ensure that the institutions fork out the money where there's theft, where there's bribery, and where there's corruption. Fifth, we need to democratize ownership of these institutions. We need to ensure that everyday Cameroonians can invest in INEO, in Camwater, in Sodikoton. Cameroonians are in meetings in their localities where they invest 50,000 every single month, 80,000 every single month, 150,000 every single month. Let's make them invest in the economy because once citizens have skin in the game, then they're going to ensure that the quality of the service improves, regardless of whether CEPI sensitizes them or gives them an incentive too. So those are 5 main recommendations.
Wow, that's great. Right, Henry Kram, Executive Director of the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute. I want to appreciate you for your time and for responding to our questions.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you guys.
We now talk sports. The Cameroon Football Federation is scheduled to hold its elective General Assembly tomorrow, Saturday, at the CAF Excellence Center in Bankomo, that's on the outskirts of Yaoundé, to elect the new federation president. According to the official list released by the Electoral Commission, outgoing President Samuel Eto'o Fils will run unopposed as the files submitted by all of the candidates were rejected. In anticipation of the process, Biwa Brian examined the electoral governing documents and provides an outlook on how the elective General Assembly will look like tomorrow.
Tomorrow's elective General Assembly is set to accomplish 2 main goals: the election of the President of the Cameroon Football Federation and the election of new members for the Executive Committee. With Samuel Eto'o standing as the sole candidate for the presidency, the outcome of that vote is largely predetermined. It is highly probable that he will be elected by acclamation, bypassing the need for a traditional secret ballot vote. In contrast to the presidential race, the election for the elective committee seats will be competitive, with a total of 19 candidates who have been cleared to run for the committee, which serves as one of the key governing bodies of the Cameroon Football Federation. The electoral process is set in motion by the General Assembly delegates, with each of Cameroon's 10 regions typically contributing a minimum of 6 delegates, each of whom is allocated a single vote.
To guarantee fairness and safeguard delegates from undue influence, the standard method of election is by secret ballot, though the General Assembly can opt for alternative methods such as show of hands, provided the federation statutes permit. The procedure is meticulous. Each delegate is called forward, receives a ballot paper, and proceeds to an isolation booth to mark their selection in secret. Subsequently, the completion of the ballot is placed in a destination ballot box, and the delegates sign the electoral register before returning to their seat. Once all eligible delegates have voted, the Electoral Commission opens the ballot box and begins the count, a process often scrutinized by impartial ministerial officers to ensure full compliance with the law. For a candidate to be successfully elected into the executive committee, they must secure a majority of more than 50% of validly casted votes, and following the count of the Electoral Committee officially proclaims the results, drafts a formal report signed by all members, and ensures the immediate publication of all official outcomes. From this point, any candidate wishing to challenge the results may lodge an appeal with the appeal committee within the designated time frame by the Electoral Commission.
In preparation for the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, the Confederation of African Football has announced an increase in the maximum squad size for qualified teams. Teams will now be permitted to register a maximum of 28 players, up from the 23 players allowed during the previous tournament in Cote d'Ivoire. According to CAF, this expansion is intended to help teams better manage health concerns, but the Confederation will only cover the cost for 23 players. Cameroon's senior men's basketball team is set to face Libya at 5 p.m. today in their second fixture of the ongoing 2027 FIBA Basketball World Cup qualifiers. This crucial match follows a disappointing 77-82 loss to Cape Verde yesterday in Tunisia during their first game in the qualifier. To understand the dynamics of the tournament, Biwa Bryan interviewed Eve Chala, a basketball consultant who offers analysis of the defeat and a preview into today's game in the following excerpt.
Cameroon turned the ball over a lot. 18 turned over for Cameroon, and we were bad at 3 points. We took over 33 in the 3 points, around 18% in the percentage, where Cabo Verde were shooting at 33% with 11 buckets on 33. We have to forget about this game and see how we are going to manage to beat Libya. It's a must-win game, because for this first round we had the objective to win at least 2 games. Now we lost the first game, and our last game on Sunday is going to be against the favorites of this group, the South Sudan. So we need to win Libya in order to have a final in the first phase with South Sudan. First thing is to be aggressive in defense. It is the DNA of our team. We were not enough aggressive. We took more than 80 points, and that's not normal. We have to reduce it against Libya. We have to focus our defense in the Mohamed Sadi, the best Libyan players, and in the offense we have to be patient. We have to move the ball enough to have great positions in the shooting in order to improve on our percentage of the shot.
And it is with that except from our basketball analyst that we call it a wrap on today's edition of the Royal English Magazine. We received technical assistance from Irish Kemwe. Alan Kwekam and Boris Tedomo took care of the cameras for our social media handles. Production assistants Glory Ngange, script editing and editorial coaching Abel Bella Samari, central coordination Roger Kiek, our station manager, and general supervision by the Reverend Pastor Bisai Emmanuel Noel. For news editing and presentation, my name is Mapala Zita. Thank you all for listening, and do have a pleasant afternoon and a beautiful weekend in the company of programs over Royal FM. More news comes up at 6 p.m., which will be a bilingual edition. But before then, up next is Geopolitique, and Jean-Patient Chala has joined me in the studio. JPT, good afternoon, happy weekend.
Good afternoon, Mapala Zita. Thank you, happy weekend to you. Je suis content d'être encore là à vos côtés ce vendredi. Nous allons essayer de voir comment les pays africains, donc les nôtres, se comportent vis-à-vis de la France. Vous avez appris ces derniers temps que Emmanuel Macron était au Gabon, dans une tournée africaine qu'on lui connaît. Il n'est pas venu à Yaoundé et on attend de savoir ce que Paris pense de la réélection du président Paul Biya. Mais la question qu'on va poser à nos invités, c'est celle de savoir, est-ce que la France peut encore dispenser ses grâces sur le continent africain, sur son ancien précaré, quand on sait qu'à l'époque de la France-Afrique, c'est elle qui décidait de qui est chef de l'État et qui ne l'est pas. Aujourd'hui, on voit que ça a beaucoup changé. Le rapport de force